Hi, welcome back everyone. This is Mihai Algiu and Peter Ingle, continuing with our talks on ideas of the fourth way. And we are going to go straight into it today, based on the last talk. We are going to explore, study, present the basic human types according to the enneagram, the fourth way enneagram. And we are going to cover two types today, the lunar type and the Venusian type. However, it is, if you come to this video, it is really essential to watch the previous video, previous episode in this playlist that you see below, episode number 34, where we talk about the types in a global, general way, and we make certain explanations as to what is the proper use of this knowledge and why it is essential to, why it is important and useful to know about this, and in which way it differs from other typologies, and especially the one that is popular last 20 years, which also uses the enneagram called the personality type. So we make certain distinctions and clarifications, and we go some important information that you got to get in order for this to make more sense. And from now on, we are going into each type. So today we start with lunar type. Would you like to start, Peter, with this one?
Sure. I'll go ahead and share my screen, Mihai. If you can see. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is, we showed this before in our introduction, as you were mentioning, where we talk about all the types. And I'll just make that big. And this is just to remind everyone that the types are laid out on the Enneagram in a particular order. And I'll use my cursor here to show that the order begins with the moon, which I've put in red, and it circulates to the planet Venus, which is the Venusian type. And those are the two we're going to discuss in detail today. But just as a reminder, it then circulates to the Mercurial type, and then it circulates to the Saturn type, to the Martial type, which then circulates to the Jovial Jupiter type, and back to the moon. And this is the circulation which corresponds, as we said, to the circulation of light in the, we could call it the interior part of the solar system. So we're going to start with the moon. And the idea is that the moon, each of the planets is like a transmitter, and each human being is a receiver, a receptor for these transmissions, these influences coming from the planets. So the lunar type is the human type, the body type lunar, is a specially designed receiver for the influences coming from the moon. What does that mean? How can we see that? How can we verify this? As we say, we don't want you to believe what we're saying. We're not propounding this as something you have to believe. This is a theory coming from the fourth way, and it has to become your own through observation of yourself and others. But how can we begin to see this? One way, we mentioned before that there are physical attributes to each type, and there are psychological attributes to each type. And both are the result of the influence of a particular planet via a particular gland in us. And in this case, the moon corresponds with the pancreas in the human being. And it's interesting to look at the moon as a physical object. The moon, of course, is round when we look at it. It's bright, but it's pale in comparison to the sun. And often it's said that lunar types have very round faces, and more round than any other type. And they also have a rather pale reflection. Lunar types don't care for the direct sun. Remember, the moon is a reflection reflects the sunlight of the sun. But lunars kind of stay in the shadow. Lunar people, men and women, they don't like to be on center stage. They don't like to be in the midst of the activity. They're not the big voice. They're not the leader, the instigator. They're on the corner of the room at the party. They come into the door and then slip to the side and lean against the wall, and They don't participate actively in meetings, even though they can be quite detailed in their thinking and in their perceptivity. They're reluctant to vocalize, to speak up, to stand out. And this is very much like this moon of ours. You know, we only see one side of it. It's not rotating. We only see one side of it. And lunar people are very secretive often. They have sort of a, you could say a dark side. Maybe it's more apt to say a secretive side. They don't reveal everything about themselves. They remain hidden and they feel safe psychologically being hidden. The moon is also a watery kind of looking surface. When you look at it, you almost look at it and you can almost see it kind of looking liquid-like. And it's no accident because the moon corresponding with the pancreas in us releases its fluids into our lymph system. And this can contribute to kind of a fleshy, watery body. And lunar people have generally kind of soft, pale skin, and they're watery. They may fluctuate a little bit in weight regularly, just a pound or two, but up and down. Their lymph system may sort of fill up, balloon up, and it may correspond even with phases of the moon. This is the theory. This is for observation to be verified on your own. And lunars can be also quite sedate because of this. The pancreas, regulates our blood sugar. It keeps it keeps the insulin level at a moderated level, and it's the gland that is responsible for doing that. And consequently, lunars, we said before, they're a passive, negative, feminine type, and all the things I've just said correspond with that: watery, lymphatic, sedate, secretive, not seeking the spotlight. And all of this lends itself to being passive, or corresponds with being passive and feminine and negatively charged. Lunar types see as Mihai mentioned in our last video, they see the glass half full. They're quick to see the problem. Don't think we can do that. Don't think that's going to work. Not sure. No, I don't want to do that. No. No, in fact, is a favorite word of the body type lunar. They're quick to say no. And because of this, all these factors I've just described too, they can be stubborn and recalcitrant, and they can dig in their heels with a point of view or resistance to something and refuse to budge. And they can be sometimes hard to persuade once they've dug in their heels, established their position, and said no. But they also are passive. They're listening. They're taking in a lot of information, more than they appear to be. They're very detail-oriented people. The moon, of course, comes out at night. Lunars like to come out at night. They prefer nightlife. The lunar type is the one who takes the midnight shift, who stays up and really starts getting good energy at 10 or 11 at night to start studying in school, and will work late into the morning and then not want to get up too early. Will like to start the day later. They're a nighttime, nocturnal type. Mihai, maybe that stimulates some other thoughts, related to all these areas that I've just mentioned.
Yeah. There was a funny one saying that, well, I don't think they are coming to the party, basically. They may not come to the party, or they may come and just not be in the center of it and just be on the side, but they may probably not want to come to the party. It's kind of too many people, it's too much pressure, it's too much attention, too much interaction. So they are more lunar type, more introvert. They have like just a few friends. They are not deeply social out there. They can have a tendency to be good at details. Details and like organizing or counting or very precise kind of work, tedious work, small work that for other types, for like a Mercury or a Marshall, it will be boring and they can't do it. But it's interesting how the divine harmony creates types that are loving certain tasks that for other types will be difficult. Another quality, psycho-energetic, emotional quality of it that which is connected to the dominant gland of the pancreas, is that they can remain calm under pressure. When there's a crisis situation, there's accidents or intense things like life or death, they can remain calm and rational and even-minded, and they can take action. It is said that often they may find themselves in some kind of position of emergency responders, or anyway, somehow working in situations that are high stress. And it might be strange because they tend to, let's say, seem petite or a little bit of not a very impressive body or athletic. So they are not athletic, big, impressive. It's more like smaller frame, not athletic, a little collapsed a little bit, or not impulsive. Yeah. However, they are excellent under pressure.
And you mentioned that they're small, and I've just put up, this is a very simple diagram image to convey sort of some general characteristics. The lunar is often referred to as having sort of an immature body. Mihai was saying they're not athletic. Lunars tend to be small, among the smallest types. Sometimes, not always, there are exceptions. You can find a tall lunar, male or female, but often the lunar type is small, slender, slightly sloped shoulders, just a hint of a paunch, and frail and delicate. And they are very delicate and detailed. And I was just thinking, Mihai, when you were talking about one of the characteristics of them being detailed, if you could put all the types, the 7 main types, in a room and watch each of them wash the dishes, they would each do it very differently. And the lunar would perhaps do it with the most precision and be the slowest and do it with the greatest care and dry every drop and clean every crumb. And then the other types, it will be interesting at some point if we talk about all of them in this regard, comparing something like this. Very delicate, very detailed, and very acute mind often, but often a soft, immature appearing physique.
Yeah. Also, one idea that I forgot to say initially is that we mentioned in the previous video, but we are now going into each type, yeah, the characteristics of a fully fledged, full-on lunar or Venusian, yeah. However, in real life, we don't find so many types like that are full 100% lunar. There is always a combination. Our type is a combination of 2, sometimes 3 types, where we have about 40-50% in the main type, and we have a little bit of the tendencies of the other type. However, when we present the types now, each one by one, it's almost like a caricature. However, there are people like that, yeah, but just keep in mind that actually in real life types, people tend to be either lunar Venusian or jovial lunar would be on the enneagram that Peter presented. So the type don't combine arbitrarily, so they combine on the enneagram. And we are going to talk later, after we finish all the type, we are going to talk a little bit about the combined types. But for now, people watching this, I know you are watching, I know many of you are watching this because you are really interested, connected to the work, the self-remembering, self-knowledge, knowing one's false personality, one's essence, knowing one's chief feature. So you may listen to this and you may recognize, oh, I have some of that, but not the whole thing. Oh, and I have some of that, the other one. So just observe like that. It's natural if you find yourself with some characteristic of one, and then as we go about the presentation, you may find other characteristic. You may make a note of that. I mean, they feel, they would love to work at home. They like to work at home. I think this age of Zoom, working at home, there was like the pandemic period was a blessing for the lunar type because they will not have go for the whole hassle of facing the world and going at the office with all these people. They are very busy and big energies and they are telling me what to do and it's too much. So somehow the asana of the attitudinal relationship towards the world or other people of the lunar is that it's like a little bit too much. The world pushes on me and they try to make me do stuff and they don't like that. They want to be
Leave me alone.
yeah, leave me alone, back off.
I want
But
to
they
do
wouldn't
my
say
own
that.
thing. I want to do it myself, my way.
So as a manager, somehow it's I mean that's really not the point of this knowledge. However, I do know people who knew this knowledge very well, and I also used it like that. You can see people, and as a manager or a leader, you can assign the right type in the right function because they will be wonderful at that task and they will love it, and then it's good for everybody. So, having some clear assignment that are of a more detailed nature and being on their own and reporting to someone without too many meetings, without too many things like that will be an ideal task for lunar.
And lunars like to work alone. This goes along with some of the things you're saying, Mihai, but big group, no. Big team, no. Small team, maybe. A pair, okay. Alone, better, even better. And they're well suited for this. And working alone, working with detail. And but just as each of these types has a physical side, a physiological makeup, remember the physiology, the physical nature of the body, the physical body is influenced by the planet and by the gland. And this pancreas and the lymph system, the lymphatic sluggishness and slowness corresponds to this type. And psychologically, we've hinted at it already, but psychologically, this type is prone to what is called a chief feature. Each type is prone to a particular chief feature. This can also have nuances. So what we're presenting is almost not a caricature, but a very general description. And in this case, the lunar type is subject to what is called willfulness. They're willful, they're stubborn, they resist. They want to do things their way. They want things on their terms. And if they don't like how you're treating them in this regard, they will shut you off. They will isolate themselves and do it themselves and do it their way. And this is this psychological feature, which it's a propensity that comes from the physiology, influences the psychology, and then through years and years of identification, it forms as this feeling of I want things my way. And if you don't agree with what I'm doing, then I don't want to talk to you. I'm done with you. I'm going to cast you off, shut you out, and I'm going to go about it on my own. And so this is the type of psychology that can build a lot of resentment. You don't see lunars running around volatilely angry at other people and trying to do physical harm to others, as is the case with some of the other types. The lunar withdraws, isolates, goes internal, and as a consequence can come to harbor resentment and hold a grudge for the rest of their life with a person. That's an extreme example or an extreme description, but it is reflective of this psychology.
Yeah, they are more cold or cool. They're not big emotions, or if they are big emotions, they are internal or suppressed or like slow burning. They're not loud, boisterous. They are not active. They are not taking space. They don't like to take space. And it's interesting. We have this aim to give some examples of famous people, famous, like, let's say, actors or politicians and I was talking to Peter right before, and we had difficulty finding famous people in the lunar, with some few exceptions, because it makes sense. I mean, they don't like to be in the light. They don't want to be a leader. They just want to be more in their own little world with a small group of people on their own. So, however, some examples we have which may help, at least the physique somehow, as well as some of the psychological features. And remember that the lunar can be a moving centered lunar, instinctively centered lunar, emotionally centered lunar, and intellectually centered lunar, yeah, like all types. So that will change a little bit. But what, like a Woody Allen would be an example of a lunar type. And you can
Yes,
see
he's a good example too, because lunars often will have a very dry, sarcastic sense of humor. And lunars like each other's company. And it's almost, you can see them huddling and having this sort of sarcastic, dry humor jokes about the world and about other people. And his films delve deep into human psychology in a very detailed way that is not necessarily sarcastic, but shows the limitations of human nature and shows the foibles and the idiosyncrasies of human nature in a very particular way in his films. And it's a reflection of how he sees the world. And
yeah.
That's reflected in his movies. I think the poet, Emily Dickinson, for those of you who know Emily Dickinson, the American poet, or not American, is she American or English? I'm not sure. But anyway, her poetry, if you read it, it's a woman in isolation in her little room, looking out at the world, reflecting on her experience in the world as very much a solo individual and tormented in many ways, but very perceptive. And then writing down these very succinct, crisp, very, very precise verses, stanzas and verses, sometimes just lines a few syllables long and a stanza 4 lines long, but very detailed and very incisive and insightful. I will put it out here. I know this is going out on the internet, but I would go so far. It just occurred to me that Mark Zuckerberg may be an example of a lunar type. And it's no accident that he began Facebook, as a student at Harvard who wanted to date. And as I understand it, if I'm recalling it correctly, forgive me, Mark, if I'm not recalling it correctly, who ended up establishing a dating site of sorts. And that's what Facebook became, was a way for people to meet each other without having to actually physically encounter one another first. And then he has a very, very strong intellectual component. He doesn't like the public. He doesn't like the spotlight. You can see he's very uncomfortable when he has to testify before Congress. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? But he doesn't like interviews. He's very, very much behind the scenes there at Facebook, at his company. Unlike someone, there are other CEOs who love to get out there and be doing the interview and being the voice of the company and having a chance to shine in the public eye. And he does not like that at all. So that's just another example.
I would say another, like Rainer Maria Rilke, brilliant and very deeply spiritual German poet. And actually, if you pull out the photo, there are photos of him online. You can just even the face. You can see some lunar, maybe lunar solar, but lunar. So once again, this is a passive, feminine, negative type. Yeah. So a male, regardless of one's sex, so it will have some of these features. Some other tendencies that they may have, besides this digging on their heels, like besides this stubbornness or willfulness, they may have fear feature, connected to perceiving that it's like the thing is big and is impending on me, and it's too much and it's stressful, and as well as lunatic feature. And we had, if you go in the playlist below, we had maybe 5 or 6 talks on chi feature. Lunatic feature is not being crazy or madman, not at all. It's somehow a tendency to get very to lose oneself deeply into details and to lose the forest and the bigger picture and get really hyper focused on one detail and going deep with it. So that's the lunatic feature. And in terms of attraction, well, each type we discuss also they have certain resonance or they have some maximum attraction. And usually couples, they end up like that, or deep friendships, or so the lunar type has maximum attraction with the Saturn type, which is an active, positive, and masculine type, which is exactly the opposite. So it's the polar opposite of the moon. And then the Saturn, usually we'll go into it later, but it's a tall, lanky, strong, male type. So you can see them together, even if they could be role reversed. So you can have a lunar man, and then his consort, the woman, is like a tall, slender, powerful woman. What do you think, Peter, that would be what would be some tendencies or some kind of ego, false personality features, or some things that a lunar type, the consciousness of a lunar type, needs to work through in order to really come into full awakening or deep awakening, some of the struggles of the lunar?
One of the things we were going to talk about is how each of these types is prone to certain kinds of negative emotions. And the lunar being passive and being negatively charged and being feminine in the sense of being absorbing, feeling as though the world is pressing on me. The world is, events are overwhelming. People are trying to control me. So there's this resistance. And as I mentioned earlier, resentment. So resentment can be a particular form of negativity that the lunar type will resort to in order to protect its feeling of I, this feeling of identity as, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I don't want you controlling me. I don't want to have to face so many events that are bearing down on me in my life. I'm going to withdraw. I'm just going to stay home. Thank you very much. And so there's this isolation, and this type of psychology can also lead to depression. And lunars can be very moody and sulky. And of course, the awareness, the consciousness in this body type, and let us stress again, everything we're describing, none of it is consciousness. Consciousness is actually independent of all these things, the physiology and the psychology. But what has been happening all of our life is our consciousness has been identifying with all of this, and we mistake this as me. And the consciousness in a lunar body type will believe that it is feeling sultry, moody, depressed, sullen, resistant, resentful, and not realize that this is all due to the type that they are. The consciousness cannot find its way out of that labyrinth of that particular psychology and those kinds of heavy emotions. Other types, as we'll see later on, being highly irritated and angry and being violent, speaking up and telling other people what you think of them, completely different psychology, completely different chemistry that gives way to that type of thinking and that type of way of behaving and those kinds of emotions. More outgoing, more active, more volatile. The lunar can go in and become so introverted as to corrupt their own system. It's not unusual for the lunar type to have digestive problems, to not sleep well, to have social reluctance and be socially awkward and uncomfortable. It's all, you see, inward facing. So the lunar, someone who's lunar has these qualities. Part of being more conscious is seeing that that is a mechanical like hole that they keep digging for themselves or that they find themselves in. And so to be more outward facing, a little more daring, instead of thinking, I can't do it, everything's going to go wrong, I can't try that, that won't work. No, to try things, to be a little more experimental, be a little more yielding. As Mihai said, the lunar can be lunatic, which means going to an extreme. Lunatic it's the type of person who goes on a very extreme diet or who goes on a very extreme physical regimen in order to build up their body or get healthier or get stronger. They'll be lunatic about it, and they'll sacrifice other things for it. It will get very much out of proportion, and they'll end up suffering because of it. A lunar can also get in their mind that something is like a particular religion is really the answer. And now they're going to go for it, and it can be very extreme. And they're like the tunnel narrows, and they can be very focused and detailed in a beneficial way, and it can also be to their detriment that the lunar can be so extreme in these different areas, instinctively, physically, emotionally, intellectually. It's hard to argue with a lunar, an intellectually centered lunar, who is determined that they are right. It's not going to be easy to persuade them. There's another way of looking at things.
Yeah, I guess what comes to mind also is keeping accounts. So not resentments, keeping accounts like a grudge, unexpressed, unspoken. They will not communicate. It will fester. They won't speak about it. And it's interesting, there's some tendency, as you said, towards negative imagination, all the things that can go wrong. And I would say that now from my clinical perspective, working with people, because all of this doesn't come out, there's some kind of this resistance towards the world, resistance towards opportunity, a kind of a smaller world. And then I think everybody has deep emotions, actually. All human beings have deep emotions, but somehow the lunar tends to hold it in, so may tend to get suppressed, emotional suppression of oneself, which no wonder then it gets into depression, because if I don't allow all the range to be there, then it gets into, I guess, suicidal tendencies and this kind of depression, hopelessness, despair.
Also, it's interesting when we start talking about these types. There's something about them, the energy of the type gets evoked in us, and it's easy, and we're almost starting to do it. You can notice it's easy to just start finding all the things that are wrong with the lunar type, just like a lunar would. And the lunar also has some very strong, wonderful, positive traits, as does each type. And we've mentioned no one can handle details better than a lunar. No one often is more calm in the particular way than the lunar. And in this way, a lunar can manifest a type of maturity, stability, equilibrium that the other types cannot, because of the steadiness. And again, it equates to the pancreas in this idea of the pancreas and insulin and the lymph system, all in combination, regulating and stabilizing the metabolism and the physical system of our body. And lunars can have this trait. Lunars can be often very sweet. Maybe your dearest friend can be a lunar because they're disarming and they're not abrasive and they don't take space and they're very, very loyal. This is something that's often attributed to the lunar type. Even though they tend to be lunatic and willful and stubborn, once they become your friend, they are loyal. They remain loyal until, of course, you, like anyone, you push them too far in the wrong direction. But they can be very sweet, dear, loyal, reliable, consistent. Lunars show up for work on time and don't leave early. And they do their job. And they may want to be alone and not be bothered, but they can be relied on. Whereas you can't say this about all the other types who are skirting corners and looking for excuses and always making up excuses and coming late and leaving early and always making an exception of themselves. Lunars can be quite the steadying influence in a group or in a family or in a circle of friends.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because yeah, we're pointing out all of these weaknesses or limitations, but yeah. Also, this it seems like the tendency towards going in depth, like deep soul, deep thinking, deep insight, not the beaten path, deep feeling in a quiet way of the mystery of the unknown. I know Edgar Allan Poe comes to me. I don't know why.
And William Blake, you just made me think of William Blake, the English
Yeah.
poet, who was a beautiful artist. And, his paintings and his poems are very mystical and speak to some kind of ethereal world, but is very thoughtful and deep, as you're saying, deep thinking, deep perceiving. And at the same time, not immature, but
A little childlike,
a little
William.
childlike. Yes,
Innocence, this innocence. Yeah.
innocent. And in fact, one of his, I think it's called the Book of Innocence, if I'm not mistaken, one of his book of poems.
Mhm.
And you can
Yes.
see he's round. He's a small person, William Blake. He was a small person with round, feminine, physical body. Very indicative and very characteristic of the lunar type.
So yeah, I think as we wrap up this type, it's worth repeating that no matter how this modern society on the modern trend of what's good and what's not so good. So regardless of these modern trends, no type is better than the other from the point of view of awakening. And every type has certain weaknesses and certain strengths, and then no type is more privileged, like easier to become conscious through this type, and each type is necessary somehow for for life, for diversity, for the how the architect designed it. And it's interesting that also I'm sure that the women, I mean men and women of the lunar type have awakened, became sages. Just no teacher come to mind, and which makes sense. One can awaken and become fully realized and conscious, but one may not want to teach. So it makes sense that the lunar sage will have maybe a close, smaller circle, or less putting himself out there.
Actually, I think I'm putting it out here. I can't guarantee anyone this is accurate, but my perception would be that Lao Tzu, or whoever was recorded as having said those things, the way it's presented in its cryptic, simplistic, very detailed, very clear, very profound, deep manner is characteristic of lunar. It wouldn't surprise me to know that the person named Lao Tzu was a lunar type. And I would even go so far as to say that the Buddha, if the Buddha actually lived, if there was a person named the Buddha, that that person was lunar. And it's interesting, there are no pictures of these people. Of course, they lived so long ago, but they're kind of hidden. They themselves are hidden behind their work. And again, I just put that out there as consideration. When you look at the art form that is expressed through the different types, often it is reflective, indicative of the type. So the artistic expression or the teaching of a lunar type would be very detailed, specific, perhaps deep, but not so, what's the word I'm thinking of, reaching for, not so ebullient, very contained, as are Lao Tzu and Buddha teachings. Yes.
All right. Well, I think we can move on with the next type. So we are going to continue with the next type on the movement of the enneagram. So starting with lunar, going into Venusian. So these are some of the physical attributes as well as psychological, energetic, emotional characteristics, behaviors of the Venusian type. We are going to go into it. So maybe I'll let you again begin, Peter.
Thank you. Yes, So the lunar type corresponding with the moon is passive and negative and feminine. As the progression moves toward the Venusian is also passive and is also feminine, but is not negatively charged. Instead, the Venusian is positively charged. And this small difference makes a big difference. And so whereas the lunar type being negatively charged can be cold, aloof, distant, withdrawing, recalcitrant, stubborn. Now the Venusian type is very absorbing and very warm and very open and very suggestive and very malleable and amiable, almost to a fault, as we will see as we start discussing it. And according to this breakdown of types in the fourth way, the Venusian type is regulated by what is called the parathyroid gland. There's a gland in our throat, and there's the thyroid, and then surrounding it is the parathyroid gland. Para, which means next to, like parallel, next to lines next to one another. The parathyroid is next to the thyroid gland, and it regulates the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is what is sort of the headquarters of our metabolism, and it determines how fast our metabolism operates. And unregulated, the thyroid can get out of control. And people who can have thyroid problems where the thyroid is overactive. But the parathyroid in nature, and it's amazing when you think about this, these glands, these human bodies, how they work on their own in this manner. But the parathyroid gland keeps the thyroid in check. But by virtue of that, it's kind of a heavy, kind of a weighing down, kind of a sluggish. It's there like a brake to slow down the thyroid. So the Venus type is passive, prone to passive inertia, sluggishness, lethargy, can be lazy, can be sloppy, physically and psychologically. These go hand in hand, as we'll see with all the types. The physiology and psychology of the Venusian type, slow, passive, warm. Venus is one of the hottest planets, theoretically, in our solar system. And the Venus type, your Venusian friends, will be very warm, welcoming, friendly, supportive. They'll do your bidding for you, if you like. They're on the ready to, that's their nature. They cannot help but be absorbing and be supportive and sort of live vicariously through others. And the planet Venus is also shrouded in very, very thick atmosphere. And it's hard for telescopes and things, cameras, to actually see what is on the planet itself because of this thick, almost mucus-like atmosphere that is impenetrable to visibility-wise. And the Venusian type is kind of like this. You can look at a Venusian and you can't quite see them. You look at them and their eyes are almost sort of cloudy and thick, and they can seem dull and lethargic, very open, very receptive, but you're not sure to what extent they exist for themselves. And you're not sure of this. Where are they beneath that atmosphere? Where's the stability? Where's the core of the planet? It's not clear. It's not known. But again, this is manifested in, reflected in the physiology and psychology of human beings who are this type called the Venusian type. And you see, we went from the lunar, which is a immature body, small, delicate, round face. And now this is just a simple model drawing of a Venusian who is now much more fleshy. And Venusians, and this is a woman shown, but men are the same. The Venusian will also often be pear-shaped physically, sloped shoulders, wider hips than shoulders. Venusian women may be voluptuous. Venusian men may be heavy and kind of thick and kind of sturdy, not muscular and athletic necessarily, but large boned and sturdy and solid. And that's kind of the physiology And it's no accident the parathyroid, which is a dampener for the thyroid gland, physically it lends itself to this kind of dampened physique. But Venusians are very durable, and they're also loyal. The lunar loyalty carries over into this type in this progression of types. Very warm, very friendly, very accommodating, almost to a fault. As I said, Venusians will be they'll give you a seat. They'll let you come and stay in their house. They'll let you stay in your house without them. They'll do errands for you. They're just very responsive, but in this sense, they can be what is called often non-existent. They don't exist for themselves. Psychologically, this is their psychological weakness, this type. They tend to live through others. They often attach themselves to other people. They're not comfortable on their own. They're indecisive. They don't know what to do. But they are easily directed by others. And in this sense can be very good support members of a team or friends.
Yeah, if I can take it from here.
Yes, please.
Actually, for a woman, the Venusian type or any Venusian combination, either lunar Venusian or Venus Mercury. So the Venusian type for a woman, that used to be a symbol of feminine beauty for millennia. Like when you look in paintings, Renaissance paintings, or primitive, very ancient drawings, or this kind of prehistoric age kind of artifacts, you see this woman that is like large and like pear-shaped and voluptuous. And only more recently, perhaps in the last 100 years or less, the symbol of feminine beauty switched to, we'll see, as the Saturn, which is like tall and lanky. But for a long time, that was the symbol of beauty. And that's why there's this some kind of, they are sensual. There's a sensualness. They're also warm emotionally, warm psychologically. They have this also, like they're feminine. It's a deeply feminine, a passive type at its best, so to say, in a way that they are nurturing, giving, loving. They are also very good, and also for men and women, very good listeners. Basically, they are listening, and they have this natural empathy and patient and listening. So usually people, when they have problems, they are usually have a Venusian friend or somebody who is like, hey, I got to talk to you now, all this happened. And they're like, yeah. And then they just listen, and then they empathize. They don't necessarily offer a solution, but they are there for you. And so that is some of their characteristics, psychological characteristics. In terms of, they like to grow things. They may like growing plants, or taking care of plants, or taking care of kids, or taking care of, the nurturer. In terms of some kind of psychological tendencies or mechanical automatic tendencies that are very tricky, and they can become very problematic for them. So is this tendency to be like this non-existence, or it's called sometimes satellite feature. So I'm not exist for myself. I'm here for others. My role is to help others, to do what others want, to help them, so I put others first. But this happens mechanically somehow, this in an imbalanced way. So they tend to lose themselves. They tend to lose their direction. They tend to lose not even knowing who they are in this deep empathy, deep listening, deep absorbing the other, taking it in, giving, sharing. So some of the chief feature would be this mechanical goodness, we call it, mechanical goodness, which is a very tricky one. And I'm talking also, I have wonderful friends or clients who have this type, and that's a tricky feature to work with, because the person is very good, meaning that they are caring for others, they see their difficulty, they naturally want to help them, they naturally want to be at service. And if they are asked, that's the thing with Venusian, it's hard to say no. They can't say no. And you ask them to do something, they'll be like, yeah, sure, sure. Even if they don't have time, they don't have the money, they don't have the bandwidth, they're already overwhelmed. Another way, this kind of good boy, good girl in a pattern. So putting others first, which is a, you know, it's good to be considerate and all of that, but not at the expense of self. So they have hard time saying no, hard time saying a boundary, hard time. And this, if it's strong, I mean, this can really bring one in a position that everybody is using me. Basically, I am exploited. A Venusian can be exploited, can be taken as a fool. Everybody in the family system, they know that, well, yeah, Jimmy, he's going to do it. He's not going to say no. So they are using him as almost like a second-degree citizen. In a way, there's like a helper, as a servant, servile. And then they don't get paid, they take being advantage of, and then again build some of this resentment and confusion, and it's really hard for them to say, no, I cannot do this, and no, this is not okay, stop that. That requires a lot of conscious work to shift from this mechanical goodness where I have no choice, it's automatic my trying to help you. Yeah, from more conscious goodness. But in order to have this conscious goodness, I need to have a choice to be able to check with myself, see what's right here, and to see where I'm at, and if I can do it. So the goodness, the helping, the giving comes consciously, not because there's no other option. So for them, a lot of work is to be less nice. They are super nice all the time, and this drains them, and they end up being with, sometimes I've seen all this combination of like really empathetical, kind, caring, Venusian giving with somebody has a strong narcissistic tendencies. They don't care about them, just use them, and they don't realize that. Really breaks my heart. I mean, I have a lot of people I work with that they have this.
And you can see how this is all driven by these qualities of being passive, being positively charged, and being feminine. All of these things lend themselves to this type of behavior, this type of psychology. Unwittingly, a person can't control this. This is how their nature. But then, as Mihai is saying, then this can end up over the long term. It begins to accumulate, to build up behind the scenes a silent, a quiet resentment. And what will often happen is because a person is mechanically good and wants to think of themselves as a good person, rather than be resentful actively toward others, they will turn inward, and it will become self-pity, and it will become self-deprecation, and it will become guilt. It will become self-blame, and they will absorb the role of being the cause of the problem and being the problem. And this happens in relationships. It happens in friendships. It happens in companies and businesses, because a Venusian is slow, but loyal and dedicated. But it can easily happen that the Venusian will end up being on the receiving end of the accusation and the blame. And they will, by virtue of being passive and positive and feminine by nature, they will absorb it. They will take it. They will take it on and suffer psychologically because of it. And this is their dilemma, their psychological dilemma, based on this type of feature of mechanical goodness and self-deprecation.
I guess something that you alluded before of this, some kind of the gaze, although it can be beautiful, sensual, open, loving, there is some kind of glaze, as if you are not home, there's nobody there. Yeah, this non-existence, it's called. And this, as we present these types, it helps to make notes and understand intellectually and all of that, and then see within yourself, and then see in a group. In the group we can understand more about types because we know each other, then we see in our family. But ultimately, as you get this knowledge, also this knowledge in the fourth way, the idea is that you can't see types in the second state. You can't see types, or you can't be very proficient at types just by in the second state, meaning without self-awareness, being in a regular waking sleep. So the more one studies that, and the more awake one is, one will get a flavor. You get the flavor of each type, yeah? So it's, all the physical characteristics, psychological characteristics, they are useful, but you get a sense, and the Venusian type is more like I would say. And sometimes, let's say, you go to a party, and then you go to a party, and then you try to remember who was there. Oh, it was this guy, and there was Jimmy and Sarah, and this or that, and there was, I don't know, there was something, but I don't remember. So the Venusian can be invisible because of this non-existence, kind of quiet, not taking space, not being in the light, not talking about themselves, not having preferences. They are kind of, and being visible, people don't remember them. So if there was somebody there who you kind of don't remember, it's very likely a Venusian. And another thing, I had a good Venusian friend, because we'll meet and it'll be like, hey, what should we do? He was like, I don't know, whatever you want. I was like, okay, all right, let's do this. So we had this great team. He had never had any problem with whatever I wanted to do, and they were always kind of happy, going along, somehow positive and warm, and then I will do all these things and talk about this, and they were like, yeah. So somehow there was no resistance. No, it went very well with my type. It sometimes worked for them to hey, what do I really want here? Hey, where would you like to go to the restaurant? Oh, I don't know, wherever you want. It's good to start with kind of, hey, choose, find preference, get to a yes and no, to change this thing that everything goes. Yeah, everything goes. Get more of a backbone in some way, while maintaining all the, that's the thing. Get a backbone, have the ability to say no, have the ability to put boundaries, have the ability to recognize being used by others and not allowing that, yet maintaining the caring, the giving, the goodness, the nurturing, the lovingness, the empathy. That will be the path of working, awakening through this Venusian mechanics.
And again, because the danger here in terms of consciousness is that this type, like all the types, sort of sucks awareness into it in such a way that now awareness forms as a feeling of I in this psychology and in this body. And now consciousness mistakes itself for, and this is kind of like a mire, a swamp, a quicksand, this Venusian type that this awareness slowly sinks into and forms into this feeling of I. And for the Venusian type, for a person who's a Venusian type, to see this, recognize this, start to see this in themselves, it doesn't mean that they need to become now active and negative and masculine. No, it means they need to find a way, consciousness needs to find a way to start slipping free of this identification. So, for example, it is helpful, the Venusian, if you ask them, what's your opinion, there can be a discussion going on in the room about politics or philosophy or science or the arts or whatever it is. And the Venusian will be there listening and absorbing. And then you turn to them and you say, what do you think, John? And they'll kind of like, I like it. I don't know. I like, they're not actively thinking. They're not actively participating psychologically in what's happening. So someone who's Venusian, it can help to kind of bring into focus the mind, the intellect, and not be so just absorbing, but to be kind of have have a spine, as Mihai said, an intellectual spine, an emotional spine, a physical spine. And
to have their back, to have your back, because otherwise
yeah.
people are going to take advantage of me. And yeah.
You know, I was going to say earlier too, if you come into a lunar's house, it would tend to be Spartan. Everything would be very clean and orderly and in place and well placed and precise and obviously well tended to, almost in an extreme way, a lunatic way. You come into a Venusian's house, it's warm. There are plants, there's carpets, there's a soft couch, there's maybe some fragrance in the air, there's some food cooking that's ready. There are curtains, and the Venusian type is dressed in very loose, comfortable, warm, attractive clothes, and can be quite sensual, this type. In fact, can be the most sensual and sensuous of all the types. And you feel this when you come into their home as well. So this is another thing to observe about yourself and about others. What's the environment that surrounds the particular type? It's very different for each type.
And I would say that there is a feature that can, the tramp feature, which many types can have that. Yeah, it's not allocated, attributed to the Venusian type, but it seems like there tends to be that they tend to have tramp, which is some way of, it's a specialized fourth way term which refers to a set of peculiarities like behavioral, intellectual, energetic, emotional, like being a little sloppy, being a little disorganized, a little messy, not crisp, a little procrastinating things, not getting things done, and a feeling of like, it's okay, it's going to work out, it's going to go by itself. So ignoring, therefore, important life stuff. I mean, ignoring making your bed, ignoring dishes in the sink, ignoring bills coming along, ignoring a dent in the car, and things like that. And that's an avoidance. It's an avoidance.
And it's a sluggishness.
Yeah.
And it's because of this psychology too. It's passive, it's positive, it's feminine. There's a sluggishness and inertia. And these things in the Venusian type lend themselves to this feature of tramp, this sloppiness, it's not a lack of responsibility, although it can be that psychologically. Because sometimes tramp can be this sort of uncaring, like, I don't care, so what? But with the Venusian, it's more sort of, gee, I'll do it later. I don't, as Mihai's saying, procrastination. It can be the sloppiness, laziness, and it's what it is it's inertia manifesting in the different centers. And this inertia can manifest intellectually, emotionally, instinctively, and physically.
Clinically, from my actual working with people, I would say that the Venusian, they have this like mechanical goodness, as I said, good boy, good girl, shadow. It's called Jungian good girl, good, like a pattern, which is like, don't rock the boat, just be nice, and not wanting to avoid conflict, easy going, and all of that. And this comes with the anger. Once anger is usually not online. And sometimes anger, there's healthy anger, there is a need to have more energy to say no, to say, I'm not going to do that, this is not okay. Somehow that is more suppressed or repressed, is not there. And I would say that it's good work for them to kind of harmoniously balance themselves and have access to these other parts, to protect themselves in some way, and to be more of a rounded individual. Rounded in a psychological, spiritual way.
I'm reminded that we used to also say that this type, the Venusian type, often makes a good nurse or doctor, a caretaker. They have a good bedside manner. You feel comfortable right away in their physical presence. They're non-threatening and they're accepting, absorbing. And so they make very good, as I say, doctor or nurse, bedside manner. Also something like a physical therapist or a massage therapist. They have a very warm energy and sensual energy they're able to transfer to others through different forms of healing. So this type lends itself well, kind of a growth and healing aspect in humanity, in society, on planet Earth, among human beings. This is the type that supplies this type of influence in humanity and on other people.
Yeah, caring, nurturing, giving, loving.
And again, you see, this is kind of the positive side of this non-existence and this mechanical goodness. These are what we are just describing now are these wonderful innate traits that come with this body and this what turns into this personality and this feeling of self. And then what it does, though, is it sabotages itself, you could say, through this non-existence and the self-pity and the resentment and the tramp. And again, consciousness being pulled down into this form as a feeling of identity, physically and psychologically. And awakening means awareness, recognizing this, that it's seeing all of this in you and in other people, and extracting itself, realizing it can extract itself from the identification with that. And then awareness can consciously begin to know itself apart from the type.
Yeah, I believe we kind of covered. Just
I will just show very quickly, Mihai. We talked about lunar and we talked about Venusian, but you can fall between the two and have both. And what's a lunar Venusian? And so and I can go to this one. You can see on the left is a lunar, and then it progresses toward lunar Venusian and then can become more Venusian. You see the Venusian is more shapely, sensual, more feminine also. And this just gives a very rough idea, general idea here with a male figure and then two female figures, but to show lunar is small, round, delicate, often thin. You don't see obese lunar types. They don't eat much. They have finicky appetites, lunars, because of their being so detailed and precise and picky. Lunars are very picky. And then when the type starts to manifest more toward the Venusian, it becomes sedate. Venusians love to just sit on the couch and eat something and watch TV. They're very sluggish, lazy, passive. And we'll see as we go through all the types, this progression, physical progression, change, and psychological differences.
There's this idea that basically all races, basically they have all these types. Yeah, we may take some time to get used to another race to understand. You know, if we're used to like white Caucasian, which is basically what we are doing here, it's mostly white Caucasian types. But however, if you get familiarized with African American, you will see that all types are within that African American or Asian. There will be all types within that Asian physique. You just need to get more used to it. But on the same lines, there are cultures or countries that have a more predominance of that type, both as a physical manifestation as well as like as a conditioning or programming or flavor of the culture. And so the Venusian, you know, it's this pear shape, like bigger butt, sensual, feminine. And so I would say that Portugal, Brazil, and Spain, there's a lot of Venusian there. Venusian and Mexico, I would say. and you see these men or women, especially women, with this more like the flavor of more like mellow and quiet and voluptuous that you can encounter.
You see it in India as well. The Indian culture has a strong, not only, but a strong Venusian component. Very family oriented, as are some of these other cultures you mentioned, Mihai. And the Venus type it's like this, can be like this warm, motherly nucleus in a group or in a family, nurturing, feeding, absorbing, caring, and sensual. Whereas, for example, the Chinese culture is more characteristically a lunar culture.
In terms of maximum attraction, especially as polarity and romantic, sexual, the Venusian is maximum attraction is the martial, which is the warrior, the fighter, athletic, fiery. We are going to go into it later. That's why even in the mythology, there's the Mars and Venus. They were this classical couple where she was like sensual, voluptuous, and caring, nurturing, and he was a warrior going to battle, and then they would meet, and there was this perfect, soothing, balancing combination. And yeah, I would say that I don't. Some types they don't get along with some other types, but I think that the Venusian, due to their stance, I think they can get along with all types, but they have particular attraction towards the Venusian is their polar opposite. So they have maximum attraction towards the martial. Yeah.
Yes, we're just laying out the very general introductory. We've already provided a lot of information. There is so much more and so many more nuances how all these types manifest and how they look physically and operate psychologically, and how the feeling of I, this feeling of I takes form, takes shape according to the type, to the body type. So we end up with an attitude about ourselves as a feeling of me, as a feeling of self. And unbeknownst to us, it's due to our body type that we feel this feeling of I. We feel accomplished. We feel competent. We feel loyal. We feel responsible. We feel irresponsible. All these things due to our type. And they're not unique. And this unique feeling of I is the illusion that Advaita talks about, that the Tibetan and Eastern teachings talk about. This is the illusion of this feeling of I. And what the fourth way so beautifully presents here is a way of understanding this, almost a scientific way of looking at the physiology and psychology of human beings and understanding, again, it's related to this influence coming from the solar system. And we are part and parcel with the solar system. And we manifest this through our types.
Very good. I guess one last thing, I mean, it's a little bit from the past, but Venusian could be in like round and smaller frame, but could be also tall. Could be tall woman, tall man. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The characteristics more like watery, passive, and round, voluptuous. It could come smaller or bigger.
And these two types we've been talking about, lunar and Venusian, generally speaking, have round physiology. We'll see that some of the types we're going to talk about next are very angular, broad-shouldered, stronger looking, more masculine. The next two types we're going to talk about are both masculine types, whereas today we've been talking about two feminine types, and we're going to be talking about two active masculine types, and it's quite different, and it'll provide more contrast and balance to what we've been saying today. It's very interesting to see, to start looking at the world this way, to see oneself and to see others in this pattern of these body types.
All right, everyone. Well, we'll continue with the rest of the types soon, and stay tuned. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai.